Hi everyone, welcome to my kitchen and welcome to Cooking with Friends. My name is Cynthia Triolo and I'm the chef instructor for the Friends of the Frelinghuysen Arboretum. Today we are going to talk about leeks. That's what this class is going to be about. I'm going to make a nice creamy leek pasta for you and maybe something special at the end. So here on my cutting board, I actually have a beautiful leek. Thinking about this, I think this is one of the vegetables that people are maybe a little bit intimidated to use. Not sure why. They're delicious. I think the hardest part about them is really cleaning them. So I kind of wanted to walk you through first how I do it. There are several ways, but for this dish in particular, the creamy leek pasta, the way I cut them is I will take just the ends off where the stems are and discard that. And then I'm going to cut just a little bit off the top of the greens, just because they get a little bit tough. And generally, the reason that I really like this pasta a lot is because we're going to use all of this. A lot of times when we're cooking with leeks, we're just using the white part of it, and we tend to discard the outer and the tougher greens at the end of the vegetable. But in this dish, we're going to use the whole thing. So, like I said, I think the thing that intimidates people the most is cleaning them. And that's because when the leeks grow, to keep this section of it white, what happens is we mound up the soil around it so this stays sort of blanched, and the leeks rise up through the soil, which means that it's really easy to catch soil inside the leeks, and that's what we really want to make sure that we clean, because there's nothing worse than getting a mouthful of grit when you're eating something that you've made with leeks. So I've cut off the ends, both ends actually, just a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is just split it in half to kind of open it up. And I'll show you what I mean. So in this half, if I start opening it, I can see that there's soil inside the leek. They come off in layers. Here's more, right? So I find that this way is a really easy way to clean them. I just run them under kind of warmish water and separate each of the leaves and make sure that I clean them really well so that there isn't any soil attached. And once I do that, I'm all ready to go. Another way to do it is to slice the leeks into half moons and throw them in a large bowl full of water, swish them around, scoop them out, change the water, do it a couple of times until you don't see any more residue at the bottom. But I find this way a little bit easier. So once I have them all clean, then I can chop them any way that I want, right? So I'm going to put one of these aside and we'll move on to the recipe. So we're going to pretend that I clean this. I'm not going to use this right now in the pasta because I've already done that. So this recipe, like I said before, I like it because it uses the whole leek. We're not discarding any of it for this, but we're going to do a couple of different things with it. So I'm going to take about a third of the leek and slice that off, and I'm going to put this aside. And I'm going to take what I cut off of the white part of the leek, and I'm going to chop it into a julienne or into matchsticks, just like that. So I have, a nice bunch of julienne leek white parts. I'm going to put those aside, and I'm going to use, for this recipe, I'm going to use 3 leeks. So I've done this with all 3 of them, and I have the julienne leeks that I'm going to use as a garnish, actually. So putting this aside, the next thing I want to do is get my pasta water started. A nice large pot of pasta, a large pot of water, salted, And I'm gonna cook the leek greens, what's left, in the pasta water first. So the pasta waters come to a boil, and I'm gonna add the leek greens. Remember, these are already cleaned, and cook them for, about 7-8 minutes until they get nice and tender. And then I'm gonna scoop them out. I'm not gonna discard that water because I'm gonna use that to cook my pasta in it. So just in the interest of time, I have already done that, and I want to show you what it looks like. So here are my leek greens that I've already cooked in the water. So I boiled it for about 7 minutes, and you can see how pliable, how nice and tender they are. The color is still nice because of the salt that's in the water. It helps preserve it. And I just fish them out with my tongs. And what I'm going to do with them is put them in my blender because we're going to puree this. So I have some already in here that I've already done. I'm going to add these to it. A little bit of the water is just fine in there because we are going to add some later. And I'm going to put this aside until I'm ready to puree. Now, the next step in the process is I'm going to do something that's called frizzled leeks with these matchsticks that I made from the whites. So here in this pot, I have a half a cup of olive oil that I'm gonna put on the fire, probably medium or so. Once you see that the oil starts to swirl a little bit in the pan, you're gonna take your frizzled or your leeks that you've already matchsticks, and these are the actual clean ones that I did earlier, and I'm gonna fry them actually in the olive oil, not for long, maybe 4 minutes or so. We like to call these frizzled leeks. And I'm gonna get a plate that has some paper towel on it to drain, and you can see that I have some here that I've already done ahead of time because it does take a little bit of time, but I will show you what this looks like once it's happening, and I will cook these off. So I have my slotted spoon. I have a plate with some paper toweling on it just to drain them. I don't really want them too oily. And you can see on the leeks, they're not all uniformly brown or actually golden color. And this is just kind of what happens with the leeks when you do that, but they do get crunchy. And it's a nice foil to the creaminess of the sauce that we're gonna make with the leek greens. So I'm gonna set this aside. I'm gonna turn up the heat just a little bit on my oil so that I can fry or frizzle the leek matchsticks that I already cleaned and cut. So I have to say that this recipe, thanks to Judy Snow, who's a board member of the Friends of the Frelinghuysen, sent it to me. She saw it before I did. It was in the New York Times maybe 2 months ago. I thought it looked great. It was the perfect idea for this class because we knew we were going to do it about leeks. But reading through the recipe, I was a little bit confused by it. And of course, before I teach these classes, I'm always testing the recipes. So I did make it for dinner one night and kind of realized reading through the recipe that we needed to do something just a little bit different with it, which is why I'm having you cook the greens first and why I'm having you frizzle the leeks before the pasta. So just so that you have everything ready. Otherwise, it's too much to do. Your pasta will never be al dente, and that's not what we want. So right here, my olive oil is, I can see that it's swirling somewhat. I can tell that it's hot. And I'm throwing the rest of these leeks in just to finish. I'm just gonna swirl the pan around a little bit, and this is only gonna take a couple minutes. I think that maybe you can hear it. And as soon as they're ready, I'm going to fish them out with my slotted spoon, and then we'll have that ready. So we have the frizzled leeks ready, we have the leeks that have been blanched in the water, in the pasta water, ready to go, and then all that's left to do is to make the sauce. Also, I've already cooked the pasta, just in the interest of time, especially for these videos. You don't need to sit there and watch me cook it. I'm using fettuccine in this recipe. You could use linguine, you could use a bucatini. Those would all be nice to go with this, but a long, or even spaghetti, you know, a long pasta I think is really nice. I happen to have fettuccine in my pantry, so that's what I'm using today. So these are almost ready, and I'll show you what they look like once they're done. So like I said, I've cooked the pasta already, but what I did do was reserve some of the pasta cooking water, at least a cup. I did a little bit more than that just to be on the safe side, because we're going to use this when we make the sauce. So here's my reserved pasta cooking water, and you do this just before the pasta is done cooking. Let it cook for a while. You can see that the water is starchy, and that's going to help make your sauce nice and creamy. So here are my frizzled leeks. I can see that they're getting golden. I'm going to turn down the heat, and I'm going to show you, if I can, with my slotted spoon, what they look like. I know it's hard to see on the video, and I'm just going to let these drain with the others on my paper towel lined plate. I'm going to fish everything out that I can. And now, so we've used a half a cup of oil to do the frizzled leeks. Clean this off. Seems like a lot of oil to use, but we're not throwing this away. This is going to be part of the sauce. So the oil has been infused with some of the leek flavor. The pasta water that you're cooking the pasta in, because you've already cooked the leeks in it, also has some of that nice leek flavor, so we're getting it from a bunch of different elements. Okay, so got my pasta water, got my frizzled leeks done, so I'm going to put these aside. I have my oil that I just finished frying the leeks in, so now I'm ready to make the sauce. So here's my blender, very old-fashioned blender. I've had literally for about 40 years, I think, at this point. And I'm just going to bring it over so you can see. It's going to be a little bit noisy. The one thing about these older blenders is that they are noisy. Now, like I said, I did this a little bit earlier. I can feel that it's still warm and it's not hot. But if you're doing this as soon as you get these out of the water and blending it, adding the pasta water, adding the oil. I'm going to add some salt and pepper as well. You want to be really careful when you're blending hot liquids, because it's very easy for the steam to make the top pop off. So you want to make sure that the top is on securely, and I usually put a towel over it, dish towel over it, just in case that wasn't quite enough. So a little bit of salt. I'm using Kosher, and some pepper, which I have over here. Excuse me for a second. Can you hand me the pepper, please? My assistant remains in the background handing me the pepper because I forgot to grab it. Here we go. So fresh ground pepper, thank you. And I'm going to add some of the pasta water. And I'm going to, keep the rest off to the side. And I'm also going to add the oil that I used to fry the leeks. So in a lot of ways, this reminds me of making a pesto because of the oil and the greens in it. I'm not adding nuts, obviously. But I've got my lid on pretty tight, but because there's hot oil in here, I'm gonna take my kitchen towel and place that over, and I'm going to hold it down. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start very slowly on the blender. Just give it a quick off and on, just like that, just to get it going. And there we go. So let me move my towel up a little bit so you can see. This is on low. And I think that that looks pretty good. I'm going to check it. And if I feel like it's a little bit too thick, and I don't really, I think it's I think I'm going to add just a little bit more of the pasta water to thin it. You want it to be a sauce consistency, right? And I'm going to taste it with my tasting spoon to just check for salt and pepper. And I think that's pretty good as far as the salt goes. But let's okay. So there's my sauce, right? Pretty simple. Just a couple of ingredients. Like I said, the hardest part is making sure the leeks are perfectly clean. I'm going to place that here. Move this out of the way. Now, for garnish, so I have my frizzled leeks that we've already talked about right here. Put these here. And I have about a cup's worth of grated reggiano or parmigiano reggiano. Use the best cheese that you have. I like this with it. You can certainly keep this vegan by not adding the cheese, and in fact, that was the original way the recipe was written. But having tasted it both ways and several different times, I really like it with the cheese in it. So that's completely up to you. And the other thing I want to add to it is a little bit of lemon zest, because that tends to brighten up the leek flavor. So I'm just using my handy grater. I have a lemon that I've washed before I'm grating it. And so when you're grating lemon zest or any kind of citrus zest, you can see that I keep moving it. You don't want to get down to the white pithy layer. You just want the outside of the skin. That's where all the essential oils are. If you grate too far down, it tends to be a little bit bitter. So we don't want that in the pasta. So I'm just going to grate the entire lemon. Just keep turning it a few scrapes at a time. And there we go. So this I'm going to also add to my pasta and to the sauce when I mix it all together. But what I want to do as well is serve this with some lemon wedges. So I'm going to use the lemon that I zested, and I'm just going to slice a few wedges so that I can bring that to the table and serve it along with the pasta. So let me get the pasta and we'll put it all together. So here's my pasta pot, also another pot that I've had for, I don't really want to say for how long, but a long time. I've cooked my pasta. Here's my fettuccine all ready to go. It's still warm. I just did this right before we started recording. So I'm going to add this back to my pot. just like that. And I have my sauce. Which I'm going to add. I really have to say this makes the perfect amount for a pound of pasta. So I'm just cleaning out the blender. Now, what I like to do when I'm making sauces like this and I'm putting the pasta back into the pot that I cooked it in is I want to put it back on the heat. I'm not cooking it anymore really, but I'm going to put it on kind of a medium heat to warm up the sauce, to warm up the pasta, and it helps, I think, the pasta to infuse more of the flavor of the sauce. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to add my lemon zest to it. And like I said, I'm going to put it back on the heat. And my big burner needs a little bit of help in lighting, so I have my trusty right there. Just on medium. Just want to see that this side. Plus, I want to serve the pasta hot. So just giving it a stir. It's a beautiful color with this bright spring green color, which I think is really nice. Now I've tasted it. I tasted the sauce before for seasoning for salt and pepper, and I thought it seemed just fine. So I think that that's fine, but you can always bring salt and pepper to the table with it. And now I can hear that the sauce is warming up. So if, I like to do this when I'm cooking the pasta, I cook it just under al dente, just under, so that I can, when I'm doing a sauce like this, that I can warm it up with the sauce in the pot, so it's cooking a little bit longer. So I think it's ready to go and ready to serve. Pretty simple. I take my tongs, and here I have my pasta bowl. I'm going to turn the flame off. And there is my bowl of pasta. Frizzled leeks go on top, just for a little garnish and a little extra color and a little crunch, which is nice with this pasta. And then I'm going to serve it actually with a little of the Parmesan. Sprinkled across, and you can bring this to the table and people can add more if they like, and with one of our lemon wedges on the side. Like I said, the lemon really brightens up the flavor of the leeks. So there you have it. Really simple, delicious, very spring-like. It's this beautiful spring green color. It just looks great, really inviting and appetizing, and a great way to use leeks. I hope that you'll enjoy it. And thanks for watching this, and thanks for the friends for all their support. And if you're not a member, please join, because we always need more friends. So just because I had a bunch of leftover leeks, and I had some potatoes that needed to be cooked, I thought I would just demo for you very quickly a potato leek soup, or vichyssoise, as it's also known. It's one of our favorite soups. I like to serve it warm. Some people like it chilled. I prefer it warmed actually. So, potato leek soup. There's really only a couple of ingredients. I have my leeks. So these are some of what I had left from the leeks that I was prepping for the pasta. And I just kind of rough chop them after I clean them carefully, of course. I don't need to be too careful about how I'm chopping them because we're going to puree this at the end. So that makes my life a lot easier. So I'm going to start with a little bit of olive oil in the pot. Oh, it turned on this time. About a medium heat. Once that warms up, I'm going to add the leeks to it, and I'm just going to saute them until they're translucent, more or less. I'm not looking for any browning on them like we did with the frizzled leeks. I just want them to be tender and softened, so it's often what we call sweating them. We do this with onions and mirepoix all the time, but here are my leeks, like I said, rough chop. I'm going to just add these to the olive oil. You could do this with butter too, but I tend to cook everything with olive oil these days, so we're using that. And I just want to give this a stir and let this, like I said, saute a little bit in there. Now, I have my potatoes that I chopped up earlier. Like I said, I had the leeks left over, and I had potatoes that I needed to use up. So I thought, okay, great. I'm just going to make the rest of this into potato leek soup, and I'll be able to have it for lunch or dinner with a really nice loaf of bread. It's often great. Also, just a rough chop on the potatoes. And because, like I said, I had potatoes I needed to use up, I'm using red skin potatoes. I'm using Yukon Gold potatoes. It's just whatever I had. I peeled them. You don't have to. You can, as long as you can clean them really well, you can leave the peels on. That's fine. It gives it a nice kind of speckled appearance when you go to puree it. And the other ingredient that I'm using is chicken broth. This is a low sodium broth, but very flavorful. You can use a vegetable stock or a vegetable broth if you want to keep it vegetarian. Or you can use water. That'll work too. So I have my leeks here, and they're getting tenderized. And the idea is I want to, pull out as much flavor in these as I can without, like I said, browning it. And I might actually save some of my frizzled leeks to serve on top of this soup when I'm ready to serve it. I think it's an all-week dinner for tonight for my family. So here the leeks are pretty transparent looking. It's hard to see, but they're softened, I can tell, but they're not taking on any color. I'm going to add my potatoes. I'm just going to give them a stir. I'm not really giving you any measurements here because it depends on how many leeks you have and how much soup, how many potatoes. But I would say, I would use, say, three whole leeks and probably maybe 5 or 6 potatoes, and then you'll need a quart at least of whatever stock you're using, and maybe more. So I'm just stirring these around a little bit, but now I'm ready to add my chicken stock. If you have homemade stock, even better. I go through so much stock in my house that I ordered by the case. So that's potato leek soup. Of course, I'm going to season it with salt and pepper, but not till the end. And I'm going to let this cook until the potatoes are soft. I'm just going going to take probably 20 minutes or so, maybe half an hour, depending on how big of a batch that you're making. And then I'm going to puree it. So like I said, I can either do it in my blender, or I prefer to use my immersion blender, my stick blender, because it's a lot easier to clean. And I can do it right in the pot, so I don't have to dirty anything else. So that works really great. And then, once I blend it, I might find that I need a little bit more liquid. If it seems too thick to me, add a little bit at a time until you get it to the consistency that you like. Season it with salt and pepper. It's important to taste it. Make sure that the seasoning is right and that you're happy with it. And then usually what I do is chop up some fresh parsley at the end after it's done cooking, after I've pureed it, and just stir that in. It gives it a nice fresh taste. So one of the things that I wanted to tell you is yesterday when I was cleaning out my refrigerator and going through and making sure I had all the ingredients for the class, I had 3 huge bunches of parsley. I get a lot of my produce, organic produce, delivered to my house every week. I started doing that with COVID a year ago, and I've been really happy with that. So, and sometimes I can choose some things that I want, and sometimes I don't always know what's going to be in the box, which makes it kind of exciting. So I do this, through the late fall and the winter months, and then when my CSA with one of my local farmers kicks in, I pause it and go through the season with my farmer, and then go back to the deliveries of from this particular market. So, but anyway, so I had 3 big bunches of parsley, and I thought, well, I could make pesto out of it, and then it'll be kind of garlicky, and I usually add nuts, walnuts to it, just a straight parsley pesto. But what I decided to do is just puree it in my food processor with a little bit of oil, and I froze it. So then, and I'll grab it, actually my freezer's right here. So then, and what I did was I freeze it in Ziplocs, marked what it is and the date that I did it, which is important. So then, excuse me, what I can do is break off a piece of it, add it to whatever I want to add it to, like I will do that with this soup, stir it in. The soup, either I can defrost this first or just break off a frozen piece because it's pretty thin. I kind of spread it out in the Ziploc and add it to my soup. So I get a nice fresh parsley flavor, but it's, I froze it, and the oil helps it to keep its color. This way I don't have to, really bothers me to let food go bad or to have to throw away perfectly good food because I forgot it was in my refrigerator or I kept it for too long. So this is one way that you can, what you can do with your herbs. I love to have fresh parsley in my pastas and my soups and a lot of different things that I'm making. So this is one way that you can preserve it and not have to throw it out or let it go bad or anything like that. So sometimes it's hard to use it quick enough before that's going to happen. So that's my tip for the day. But my soup is cooking, and this is going to take a while. So I'm going to sign off now because you guys know what to do. So I'm going to let this cook until the potatoes are nice and tender. And then I'm going to puree it. One other thing that I wanted to say was I make a lot of soups at home because I have to bring my lunch to work, and it's just easy to grab. So I freeze them in sort of portion-sized containers. One of the things that happens when you freeze soup that has potatoes in it is when you defrost it, it kind of looks, I don't know what the word is, maybe like chunky. So you need to, so I don't want that to surprise you. That's normal that happens. It's the starch from the potatoes. Once you warm it up, that'll come out. But what I usually do is warm it up and then blend it again with the immersion blender. And then it's nice and smooth, nice and velvety, creamy again. But I just didn't want you to be surprised if you do end up freezing it. make a big batch, freeze it, have it for, a great lunch with a nice loaf of sourdough bread, which I know you've all been making, or it could be dinner as well. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoy the recipes. And again, thank you to the friends for making all this possible. And we'll see you soon. Thanks very much.